asking a question. Do you have any regrets in life? Does anybody here ever they regretted doing? I know that's probably a silly question because we probably all have regrets because we make mistakes in life, and so we come to regret those later on. I came across an article and it was called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. There's a nurse named Bronnie Ware. She was a palliative nurse in Australia, and I think she had been providing end-of-life care for 20 years or so. And so I think in 2011, she wrote this article where she documented a lot of the regrets that people she was caring for had shared with her. And I thought that would make a good lesson title, and I think we could build upon that. I will say before we get started that her article lacked any kind of spiritual notion at all. It was a truly this world perspective. It was regrets that people, I don't know who the people were, I don't know what their walk of life was, if they had any religious background at all, but all of the regrets that they have are truly this world regrets. But we're going to try to approach it from a biblical perspective and then try to make some application based upon those regrets. Appreciate you being here this morning. Hopefully the time we spend together will be beneficial for us and, of course, pleasing to God. That's our goal. And as we look at these things, I want to start by looking at the couple verses that Gage read for us. Right over Ecclesiastes, it says, "The word of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. A life lived without God in the picture is sure to be a life of regret." And as we're looking at these things, I want to say that at the beginning, and then we'll follow up on the end. But if you live life without God, your life is sure to be one that's regret. But let's examine these top 5 regrets that are mentioned in this article that was written by this nurse from Australia. I think it's interesting to look at how people think from a general sense and then apply that to how we ought to be thinking based upon the Word of God. The first regret that she said, this is the number one regret, the most common regret of all. People said, "I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me." Regretting that dreams were unfulfilled due to choices being made is what I get from that. And so sometimes when you get toward the end of life, as these people were that she was talking to, the loss of their health, limited opportunities, but you can understand what's being said here. Maybe my parents wanted me to take over the family business, but my passion was always photography. And I didn't follow that. I took over the family business, and then I get to the end of life and I think, I should have followed my dream and I should have been a photographer. Or whatever the example would be. That's really what I think is being said here. So we can understand that from a worldly perspective, but from a spiritual perspective, I think that people have this idea today that being true to their self, being true to oneself, is valid even if it means doing something and being something other than what God wants me to be. So from a spiritual perspective, I think there's a little bit of danger here. And I think we'll see this as we go along. There's some good thoughts and there's some bad thoughts, but no one has the right to be true to oneself if their views are something that is in violation of what God has required. In John chapter 9, beginning at verse 1, it says, "As Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, 'Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?' Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." So the context here indicates the works of God. That's what's being talked about. And Jesus said that's what I should be doing. And if anyone who has ever lived had the right to be true to themselves, had the right to do what they wanted to do rather than what somebody else expected of them, that would be Jesus, right? He would be the number one person that could feel that way. If anybody ever could say, "I want to be true to myself," it would be Jesus. But how did he conduct himself? Well, he didn't feel that he had that right. He said, "I must work the works of him that sent me." So Jesus didn't feel like, "I'm going to be true to myself and do whatever I want to do." No, he knew that he was in subject to his Father, and he wanted to work the works of his Father, and he couldn't work in a way that was, or live in a way that was separate from the will of his Father. But of course, Jesus, he desired the same things that God wanted. I acknowledge that. If you look at that sort of argument, Jesus and God were on the same page, the Father. And so he lived out what his father wanted, they were on the same page. And so people may say, well, I'm not on the same page with God, so he wants me to do one thing and I want to do another thing. But our desire should be just like Jesus's was, to work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. So we're not talking about limiting people necessarily from what job they want to do or what hobbies they want to take up, assuming that they don't hinder service to God. But the only way to be accepted is to be true to God, not really true to oneself. And I think Paul had the same idea when he wrote the book of Galatians. In Galatians 1 and verse 10, this very familiar verse. I like the New American Standard here. It says, "For I am now seeking the favor of men or of God." So who am I trying to please? Am I trying to please men? If I were still striving to please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. So you can't have it both ways. You can't work to try to please the world and please God. That's not going to work out. If you try to please the world, if you try to please men, then you can't be a servant of Christ. And so Paul recognized that he shouldn't be so worried about pleasing others or even himself, but pleasing to God. And so when you go back to that first regret, people wish they had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not the life others expected of them. Again, we're not talking about jobs and hobbies, but we need to be living a life pleasing to God. And it's not all about me, and I think we should understand that. That's the number one regret that this nurse documented that people had, living a life true to themselves. The second one is, I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I didn't work so hard. In this article, she noted, especially from the men, older men, it was noted that they felt they spent way too much time working. So the regret is that not that work is not important, it was that work was too highly valued, and because of that, they missed out on opportunities to be with family, to enjoy other things in life, and really live life to the fullest because they were so focused on their work. We've got to point out, and it's so in today's society and our culture, it seems like work ethic is non-existent. The Bible does talk about that, and it is a good thing to have good work ethic. In 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10, Paul said, "For even when we were with you, we would give you this command, if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." So, a couple knots in here. If you're not willing to work, then you do not need to eat, is what Paul said there. And so the scriptures teach the necessity of having a work ethic. So God says if you don't work, you shouldn't eat. That's not politically correct today. And we're not talking about some physical or mental issue that would not allow a person to work. This is a person who is not willing to work. They're able, they just don't want to. And so the Word of God says if that's the attitude, then they shouldn't eat. But again, having a work ethic is a good thing. In 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8, Paul wrote to Timothy and said, "If anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." So what's the big deal, I guess, if I don't want to work? Well, you've denied the faith and worse than an unbeliever. You're in a bad off situation. You're in a terrible condition if you don't understand the importance of working and providing for your own. And so there's value to having work ethic, and that's a big responsibility. The responsibility of providing for your family should be taken seriously. Having said all of that, though, the regret was people believed that they had worked too hard. They had spent too much time working. In Ecclesiastes 2, beginning of verse 18, it says, "Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is vanity." So that's the result there. It's vain to spend all your time working on the here and now, knowing that somebody else is going to have it once you're gone. And who knows what they're going to do with it? Will they be wise or will they be foolish? We don't know. So what here we find, the truth here is that you can't take it with you when you go. And so if work is number one in your life, then you'll have wasted your life when it's all over. As I was thinking about this, I'm really thinking about a child's perspective. Got kids and thinking about their perspective. And so maybe I'm working more and I'm earning more to give them more stuff. And they like stuff. But it would be better for me to work less and make less and them to have me more than more stuff. And I can relate to that. I wish I didn't work so hard. It would be better to work less and make less and spend more time and provide more of yourself to be with your family than to, try to choose to work over and make more so that I can have more stuff. That's vanity, is what the Ecclesiastes book says. And so the second regret is I wish I didn't work so hard. The third regret that was mentioned in this article is I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Now this one's kind of tricky, so before you really get thinking, I can relate to that. This isn't talking about I wish I had the courage to tell people how happy I was. It doesn't take courage to tell somebody you're happy or tell somebody you're sad. What they meant here, this is a bad one. What they meant here is they meant I wish I had the courage when somebody made me mad to just tell them off. I wish I wasn't so shy to go off on them. So these people internalized resentment and bitterness, and then they started having effects to their health, negative effects to their health because of that. They wish they had the courage to go off on people when they made them mad. So I'm at work and my boss yells at me, and I wish I had the courage to scream him down in front of everybody. I'm going to tell him exactly what I think about him. That's what this regret is. I think that's sad, isn't it? That's what they were regretting, that they had the courage to express their feelings, but not in a good way. That was the number 3 regret. In Proverbs 12 and verse 16, it says, a fool's wrath is known at once, but a prudent man covers shame. It's a foolish thing to fly off the handle. It's not positive. And when you externalize your ill feelings and you put them out there, you're out of control. And a fool's wrath is known at once. But a prudent man, he covers shame. A person that is wise doesn't act that way. In Proverbs 15 and verse 1, it says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And so, if we go back to that example of my boss yelling at me, and you're thinking, man, it would just feel so good if I could yell at him whenever he upsets me. That would make me feel so good. But the end result of that would not be good. Things are going to escalate if I do something like that, and they're not going to turn out well. I'll lose my job, cause a scene. My reputation is going to be not great for how I handle things. And so the proverb writer says that if you answer in a soft way, you turn away wrath. But a harsh word, all it's going to do is stir up anger. It's going to make matters worse, is what the proverb writer says. We kind of talked in class, in the adult class this morning, about this. Because if we handle ourselves in one or two different ways when this idea of sin and forgiveness comes up, we got to handle things the right way. And we mentioned this in class. But there's a process to follow when you've been done wrong. And that's found in Matthew 18, beginning at verse 15. Jesus said, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you've gained your brother. But if he will not hear, take with you 1 or 2 more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. All right, so this is the process, and the process just is what it is. Maybe sometimes that's difficult. Maybe it'd be easier for me to just fly off the handle and not handle it the right way. But this is what Jesus said. If there's an issue, you go and tell the person between you and him alone. That's how it ought to be handled. You have that conversation. And if he hears you, you've gained your brother. I mean, you've corrected the problem. You've settled the issue. And so, again, we won't go through the whole thing, but you follow the process. If they won't hear you and him alone, you take 2 or 3 more with you, and then you take it before the church if it's not resolved. And so the point here is, though, the regret was, I wish I had the courage to just go off on people that made me mad. Well, from a biblical perspective, if you're a Christian, you don't have to, when you're wronged, get so upset and get so resentful and bitter and want to express things that way. There's a proper way to handle it. And it's difficult. Nobody is saying that it's easy, but if you go and have that conversation, most of the time it'll be stopped right there. It'll be corrected. There's an issue that arises. You go and talk to them about it, and it's corrected. You've gained your brother. You're back in good standing again. And then we can move on. So follow that process in a loving way, and the goal is reconciliation, getting back on good terms. And we don't have to be bitter. In Matthew 5, verse 23, Jesus said, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift." And so Jesus said it's important to settle issues. It's of utmost importance. I mean, you're there going to offer your gift. And he says you need to take care of your issue with your brother first and then come back and take care of business with offering your gift. So it's important to settle issues, but we need to be long-suffering and bearing with each other. And I really think, as I think about number 3 there, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. That's a negative, in a negative way. I really think that was because things weren't handled the right way. If we would just handle things in God's way, we wouldn't have to have resentment and bitterness like that. But that was the top, number 3 regret of those that were dying. They wish they had the courage to express their feelings. Number 4 is I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And I can sympathize with that one. I guess everybody to some degree can relate to that. It just happens as you grow up and you move through life that you lose touch with friends who at one time were very close. Maybe you're best of friends and now you don't speak to them anymore. That happens, I guess, to everybody in life. But that was one of the regrets. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. In Proverbs 18 and verse 24, the proverb writer says, "A man that hath friends must show himself friendly." It's a true statement, isn't it? I mean, if you want to have friends, you've got to be friendly. It's a good thing when that happens. He says, "There's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother." And isn't that true? You know, I'm an only child, so I can't, speak to anything else. But if you have close friends, I mean, they're like family. And that's a good thing to have. In Proverbs 27, beginning of verse 9, it says, "Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, nor go to your brother's house on the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor nearby than a brother far away." And that's so true, isn't it? Better to have somebody close by to you there than a brother far away. We need to nurture friendships, and here's the caveat. We need to nurture friendships if the individuals you have as friends will make it easier for you to go to heaven. That's the big caveat. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about my own life. Maybe it's true for you. There's a lot of people I'm not friends with anymore for good reason, because they were dragging me down. They were pulling me away from God. And so we don't talk anymore. You need to nurture friendships if the friends you have are going to help you live right. There are some friends that need to be rejected. And probably, especially for young people, there's some friends you need to stay away from. If the people you're hanging out with are pulling you away from God, then it's time to start distancing yourself from them. They're just pulling you in the wrong direction. In 2 Corinthians 6, beginning of verse 14, it says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? Therefore go out from their midst and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing. Then I will welcome you." Paul was using the Israelites as an example because they were corrupted by the idols that were all around them, because they interacted with the nations that were around them. And they got corrupted because of that. So they let the people that were around them get sort of them into trouble. And Paul was using them as an example. And he said it ought not to be that way. You've got righteousness. What kind of partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? There's no place there for it, right? Or what kind of fellowship has light with darkness? Well, there shouldn't be any. That's the point that Paul was making. And so he talking about them, therefore go out from their midst, be separate from them, touch no unclean thing, and then I will welcome you. It's always been true that God's people have needed to separate themselves from those who are bad influences. And when they failed to do so, they got themselves into trouble. And that should be true for us today as well. So I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. There's a good aspect of that, but then there's also maybe a danger. If the friends are good, if the friends are going to help us make it to heaven, that's a good thing. But if they're not, then maybe we should lose contact with them. All right, there's 4. Here's number 5, the top 5 regrets. Number 5 was, I wish I had let myself be happier. I wish I'd let myself be happier. And I think the idea here in reading this article was that people got in a rut. You ever got in a rut? You're doing the same things day in and day out, and so you sort of get in a rut and you feel stuck in that rut. And so you never really put forth the effort to try to do anything outside of the normal routine. You just feel kind of stuck. And so maybe a person thought, I always wanted to quit my job and go backpacking in Europe. But I never did that because I was stuck in the rut. I had to go to work every day and just had too many things tying me down. That would have made me really happy, though. I could have been truly happy if I would have done that. And so I wish I would have let myself be happier. I think that's a sad statement, but I really want to, for us, ask the question, where does true happiness come from? And I think that's important to consider. In Ecclesiastes 2, beginning of verse 1, it says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also is vanity. I said of laughter, madness, of mirth, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. Here Solomon, he said that some have the idea they're going to try everything they could possibly do because I want to be happy. So I want to try all these things. And if I do all these things, surely I'll find happiness. And he says right up front here, oh, that's vanity. I mean, you can do all that. And maybe it's enjoyable for the time, but that's not going to produce true happiness. That's vanity. It's vain. And so it'll be fun. It'll be a big party. Solomon says it's vanity. I was thinking about Job. Job had friends that didn't always get things right. And we got to say that up front. They blamed him for his circumstances. But here is some true counsel from Job's friend Zophar. It says, do you know, in Job 20, verse 4, do you know this of old, since man was placed on earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment. Now that's some true counsel there. So it does seem like the wicked are triumphing. I mean, it appears like they're having a good time. But Zophar said, that's what it appears like, but that's short. And it says the joy of the hypocrite. It appears maybe that they're doing well and that they're just truly happy. But that's just for a moment. He says it's just for a moment. It's not going to last. True happiness doesn't come from what this life has to offer in the pursuit of pleasure, in the pursuit of things this world has to offer. True happiness is found, of course, in service to God. Remember the account of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke 16? So remember that in this account, the rich man had pursued pleasure his whole life, and he had found it. Really, he was called the rich man because he was rich, and he had a lot of good things in life. And Lazarus was a poor beggar, full of sores, and Lazarus, all he wanted was just eat the crumbs off the table of the rich man. And so if we looked at it from a worldly perspective, the rich man, everything's great, he has to be happy. Lazarus has to be miserable. What a terrible existence. When Luke 16, verse 24, it says, he cried and said, Father Abraham, this is the rich man, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receives thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. It's interesting, as I was thinking about this, there's no denying that the rich man had good things. I mean, Abraham was able to tell him, you received good things in life. Life was pretty good for you from a worldly perspective. You had plenty. And Lazarus in life, he did not have good things. I mean, life wasn't so great for Lazarus. I mean, he was full of sores, and he was poor, and he was begging, just wanting to eat the crumbs off another person's table. Terrible. But the end result is Lazarus, is comforted, and the rich man is tormented. I mean, it's a simple story, and I know that we know that, but the point here is that Lazarus was a righteous man, and so no matter his circumstances in life, when the end result of their choices in life came about, Lazarus was comforted. And he was better off. And I would just submit to you that Lazarus was truly happy then. True happiness comes from being pleasing to God. In Matthew 5, verses 11 and 12, these are the last couple verses of the Beatitudes, the section we call the Beatitudes. And you'll remember that blessed, if you look at the Greek word for that, it means to be happy. And so some translations may even say, happy are you. But Jesus said, blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, Jesus said, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And so we got to point out that Jesus said, you should be happy when people are doing these things to you. They're doing it to you for my sake. He said, rejoice and be exceeding glad. We would say be just as happy as we can be because your reward is in heaven. And of course, he noted that the same thing was done to the prophets before you. The same thing was done to him. Jesus said there's lasting happiness that far surpasses anything this world has to offer, and that reward is found in heaven. And so when you think about those top 5 regrets, the last one, I wish I'd let myself be happier. Well, if you're living a life pleasing to God, you can't be happier, no matter what your circumstances are here, because your end result is the reward of heaven. All right, so top 5 regrets from those that were dying that this nurse documented. And I think you'll agree there's some that you can relate to, and there's some that, especially this one, is just not good. But from a biblical perspective, we kind of see how this is how people generally think. From the biblical perspective, this is how we ought to be thinking. So, I started out by asking you, do you have any regrets in life? And I'm sure we all have done things that we regret. But I think what troubled me most about this article was that all these concerns were about not doing things a particular way or being a certain way or keeping in touch with certain people. And the whole point was missed. Out of all these regrets, they missed the whole point, because life isn't about any of those things. Life should be about not getting the most out of this short existence, but making sure that we obtain the promise of eternal life. And so I think that's what troubled me the most. They missed the mark. All these regrets, there was no spiritual focus on it at all. And I guess I would just submit to you, if you live your life in such a way that you miss heaven, then that'll be the biggest regret of all. None of these things are even going to be close to that. Because once you get to the other side, if you are not in a good standing with God, you've missed it all, and you're never going to have a chance to make it right. What a regret that would be. But however, if you live a life that's pleasing to God, when you're on your deathbed like these people, you will have no regrets. Yeah, maybe there's some things I could have done differently, and maybe I could have stayed in touch with some people that I lost touch with, and maybe I could have been a different type of person. But if I live a life that's pleasing to God, I'm not going to have any regrets, because we'll be looking forward to the reward. We may lose friends. We may face adversity. Our life may end up being like Lazarus's. I don't think that's the case for any of us this morning, but even if it was, if God's at the center, there'll be no regrets. And we'll be looking forward to a home in heaven with God. I appreciate your attention this morning in thinking about this. I think there's some benefit in considering how people think, and I think there's obviously benefit in us considering we need to be living lives that's pleasing to God. And so if you're here this morning and you're thinking about these regrets, maybe on your list right now is the regret that you haven't become a Christian yet. You know that if you were to die right now, you're not in a good standing with God. You got the opportunity to make that right. And we can do that this morning. We'd be glad to talk to you about that. We'd be glad to help you understand, if that's your desire, what the plan of salvation is. And if you're willing to this morning be baptized into Christ, we help you out in that regard. Or maybe you've got a regret now that you've fallen away. You were once in a good standing with God and you knew it, and now you know that you're not. We'd be glad to pray for you and with you and help you get your life right with God. That's what it's all about. And so if you have a need this morning, come forward while we stand and while we sing.